representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
It feels incredible.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of FOF Live with our brand new sponsor. We are now sponsored by Burger and Hicks. Yes, one of that name does sound familiar, as it is, well, the dad of Noah Burger, our very own Noah. We're happy to have your dad on board. He is now the father of FOF for the moment, as he is sponsoring the show. But how's your dad feel? You mentioned a little off screen that your dad's like on a flight, can't really talk. Just tell us about just what your dad thinks doing this, and maybe how he's feeling about it.
It was kind of weird seeing my father introduce the stream and being at the beginning. But yeah, that is my father. I'm excited about this. My father's been very supportive of me and very supportive of what we do here at Fish on First, and he's been begging me to bring it up to Eli to possibly do a sponsorship. And Eli came up with the idea of possibly having the injury report or injury tracker be sponsored by Burger and Hicks Accident Attorneys, which just makes perfect sense. So yeah, right now he's taking his once a year trip that he blocks out everything else. Finally gets some time off. He's up ice fishing right now. Hopefully he doesn't fall through the ice, whatever ice there is. But yeah, he's excited about this, and I'm excited for his too. It's gonna be cool. If it means more business for my father, hey, I'm not complaining. If it means more business for us, I'm also not complaining.
And with that, FOF officially has more signings than the Marlins this offseason with Burger and Hicks. But it's going to be fun to say that. I got to find a fun way to incorporate it, fun way to maybe say it in the stream. I'm not going to say word letter by letter. That'll take way too long. But it's great to have your dad on board. It's going to be a great time. Maybe we can get a couple prediction videos from him and maybe even a guest spot. But let's talk about, while we're all here, the Marlins. Interesting news as of late, signing Director of Amateur Scouting. Arbitration deadline is coming up very quickly this Friday. Kevin, round out this week. We had a crazy spaces with Mish. Lots of news. Marlins don't look like they're going to be spenders at all, focusing more on the front office. A quick roundup for the Fish.
Yeah. News, as always, we're going to get that with arbitration coming up soon. There's, I believe, 11 players up for that. So highlighted mainly by Luis Arai. So we'll see if they settle on something. I mean, that's one of the cases that I'm looking at to see if they're going to go into a discussion on that, or they're hopefully they settle. You never want to have to end up going into, I think it's our court. I think it was 200 degrees there.
Yeah. Right.
So,
we'll get into that. We'll get into that.
Yeah, we'll get into that. But obviously, the big one is Rachel getting hired by the Marlins to replace Geoff DeGroot. This is a big hire. She was a coach for the Tampa Tarpoons. I believe that is the low A affiliate for the New York Yankees. A lot of good players have come by her. Jason Dominguez most notably. So that is definitely the big one I'm looking at. And she knows what these minor leaguers go through. She's a trailblazer, as called that. And she's been, in Major League Baseball for a very long time. She's been in baseball in general for a very long time. So very good hire by the Marlins. I know Noah wrote the article, so I'll let him get into it a little more. But this is a big, this is something that this organization as a whole has really struggled with, which is development of prospects, specifically position players. So I'm glad that they're bringing on someone, and hopefully the development changes. There's a lot of guys, still people in the organization that were here last season and have been in seasons prior, but someone who's experienced, who knows what these guys go through on a day-to-day basis, definitely makes a lot of sense to bring on the organization. Let's see how long it'll last. Let's see what the results come out to be in a couple of years. I'll give it 1 or 2 years to see what happens. But you're gonna have to give it more than that, honestly, just to see which players come up to the big leagues, what the drafting strategy looks like now with Frankie Pilieri there. So it's a good staff. And Craig said it on the Spaces yesterday, that it's not even close to being finished. This is a complete overhaul, what we're seeing here with the front office. So they're still yet to replace Adrian Lorenzo, which we'll probably get into some international talk here at some point with that coming on the 15th, and they're still yet to do that. But good to know that Ozzo Campo, who specialized in that area for a very long time, is now taking over that area for now. So yeah, should be fun. Hopefully at some point we get some signings, we get some trades. But this small news always fun to talk about, especially when it comes to player development, which is something that will be hammered in this organization for years to come, especially under Peter Bendix.
Well, once Bendix took over, people rushed to the assumption that he would pattern this organization off of the Tampa Bay Rays, including actually bringing over his people from the Rays. And as this plays out, he hasn't really done that. And there are reasons why. There's some guys and women from the Rays that he's unable to bring over because they're under contract and they have certain responsibilities to their organization. It's not like you're allowed to bring over anybody you want, depending on what position you're looking to fill. Rachel most recently came over from the Yankees after spending, I think, 4.5 years there in various roles. Most recently as minor league manager. The Frankie Pilieri, as Kevin mentioned, the new draft guy. He came over from the Mariners. The director of baseball operations, Vinesh Kantan, he came over from the Rangers. He previously worked for the Rays, but most of his professional career has been with the Rangers. And then who else? Gabe Kapler. Gabe Kapler most recently was with the Giants. We go way back, and he spent like a little bit of his playing career with the Rays. But other than that, I think this flies against the assumption that most people had, that you bring in his own people that he. And now I'm sure he has some sort of relationship with a lot of these people, but not in the way that the most obvious way. It's not as if what we're seeing is what initially the Marlins did under new ownership and bring in all the ex-Yankees to come work under Jeter. This is much different than that. And I think that's a good thing, because you want to bring over people you want to have a really broad search for the right type of people. And the tricky part is that in most of these cases, they're getting promotions to come over, or they're going to roles that are a little bit different than what they previously had. She's going from a low A minor league manager, as cool a milestone as that was. That is a lot different from running a farm system as the director of player development. So, and that's the pattern across the board here. So you can be really excited and you can gloss over these resumes and be impressed. But ultimately, we just don't know, because Rachel and most of these other hires are filling particular roles that they've never done before. There is some uncertainty when it comes with that.
Yeah. And Noah, I want to just ask you, you wrote the article on her, just a little bit more about her experience in baseball, in what ways you could see her improve the team.
I see my father needs to sponsor Daniel's internet too.
Huh.
I like this hire. She's
There he goes.
very much overqualified for this kind of position. Has years of experience dealing with minor league strength and conditioning, and she has advanced degrees in multiple human body sciences and sports sciences type degrees, one of which she went overseas to get in the Netherlands. She's gone to different places to continue in her baseball journey. She's gone to the Dominican Republic. She's fluent in Spanish, which is huge for someone that's going to be dealing with a lot of Latin players. She, when the COVID shutdown happened, she went over to Australia and coached in the Australian Baseball League. So she's been around she's been around the world. I was going to say around the block, but she's been around the world in baseball, and it's just another stop on her career. And hopefully she can resurrect what is left of a Marlins minor league system.
Yeah, it is a very big challenge coming from where they're at. It's
an uphill climb.
Yeah, I just watched a breakdown that I hadn't seen before from Lance Brodstowski about the data across all minor league hitters and all organizations. And kind of unsurprisingly, looking at last season, Marlins hitters as a whole, aside from just being not good, their process was bad. They were undisciplined down there. You look at all the numbers and they chased outside the strike zone more than minor league hitters from any other organization. So it's one thing if you're at a talent deficit, but clearly the hitting instruction throughout the organization was leading to not in the right direction. And now that's what's interesting about that is because guys came through in clutch situations at the big league level. It was something where there was a lot of interest and some excitement about this new prioritizing hitting for contact and that element of it. And they did that at a good level, both at the major league level and in some levels of the minors. They produced good contact hitters.
But none of those guys were developed by the Marlins for the most part.
Yeah, that's part of it too, where even some of the success stories weren't original Marlins signees. They were coming up from had to be traded for and put into good positions to succeed over here as well. So that is part of it too. It is a mess. And trading away some of the few prospects that did perform well, that also had an issue. That was an issue going on here as well, where given how aggressive they were last year in trying to put together a playoff team under Kim Ng, some of the few real standout players are now with other organizations as well. So it's a big challenge ahead. As Kevin pointed out, it'll take a few years to understand that. And I imagine that we're going to see some patience from Bruce Sherman all the way down in terms of revamping all these best practices and teaching stuff in order to put them in the right direction. They're not going to rush to judgment. They've created a long runway for themselves, and that's kind of been the source of not confusion, but that's been the really unusual circumstances that the Marlins find themselves in, coming off a really good regular season, but yet resetting essentially at so many levels where even though so much emphasis was put on being good and winning games in 2023, like it doesn't seem that's going to be the case in 2024.
Yeah, and that's certainly one thing that I think has stood out, the strikeout percentage and especially just overall approach. And that's something that I'm glad you mentioned, because you look at, especially in the lower levels, I mean, those are guys that are a lot younger, and those guys more or less tend to have more aggressive approach. And you could look at the case of Jose Gerardo, who struck out over 40%. But you look at the case of Troy Johnson, who I believe he does chase a lot of pitches from the outside, and sometimes they do hit. And I would look at late in the year, he had a home run that was pitch out of the outside, and he got a home run off of that. Probably one of the more impressive swings, but for the most part, he's swinging outside too. So, I mean, we can look from top to bottom of this organization, a very high strikeout percentage for the most part. So I am glad you mentioned that aspect there. So, yeah, definitely interesting. I mean, you could go down the list. Kemp Alderman, Brock Vredenberg, those are going to be guys who are very likely going to strike out at high percentages. My guy, Torrin Montgomery, probably same case too. I mean, you look from top to bottom, a lot of weird approaches. There's a lot of good ones. For example, Xavier Edwards, I mean, I know Noah mentioned it, now with the Marlins for the most part wasn't developed, but his approach is different. Look, and he comes from San Diego and Tampa. So you kind of look how different approaches could look like. Those are two of them. That's one of them right there. And I'd have to look at Jacob Amaya, but I don't think he strikes out too much either. But yeah, definitely something that you got to look at. Maybe you could look at the Yankees and see how different their philosophies were or their approaches, just looking at, strikeout percentage and overall just how much you get on base. But yeah, certainly something I'm glad you brought up, because that's definitely been an issue for this team, especially in terms of development. I know, and then there's the cases of Jacob Berry, who doesn't strike out too much, 20%ish. So there's good cases, but then there's the Jose Gerardos and Anthony Figueroas.
Yeah. And with that, I think it's a great time to go ahead and talk about the Little Spaces last night with Mish. I know it was a lot of information, more information dump people just waiting to hear some type of news from Craig, someone signing some trade. There's a lot of talk. Jesus Luzardo potentially getting traded. Eddie Cabrera, Luis Arias, what is his contract extension, if one, going to look like? Eli, just a little maybe summary, maybe the key points that you took from this. Maybe if you had I don't want to say summarize it, but maybe the few things that you really took from the spaces.
Well, being as transparent as possible with us, he just really reiterated that it's one thing to have some like negotiations and free agent pursuits hidden from the media and hidden from public view. And it's also what he kind of made clear is that there really just has not been much going on at all in terms of pursuing players and trying to make 2024 upgrades. That aside from the rumor that got out about Isaiah Kiner-Falefa, and he confirmed that they were in the mix for him, this utility player who is just as ordinary as you could be, ultimately went to the Blue Jays. They got outbid for him. And that outside of that, they just have not pushed hard for any of these major league free agents. At this point, one of them and the Yankees are the only teams at this point that haven't signed a major league free agent. And according to Mish, they just haven't been close to doing so. And it's almost unheard of, touching on, the last season that they just had and the momentum they had coming into the offseason. It's so unusual to make it this far and not do anything about it. And even in the context of a slow offseason across baseball, they stand out for moving really slowly. It's just such a high priority on changing, you could say fixing, but it's really just more of totally overhauling a lot of the processes that happen internally. Aside from just bringing in new people, apparently just a lot of their focus is on figuring out what's going on the inside and like attending to not just hiring people, but also looking at long-term projects. What Craig did say is that he thinks there's a lot more hirings to come at various levels, especially in analytics and in sports science. And he alluded to something, I didn't even mention it on the space, about the concept of building their own sports science lab. That is something that other teams have done. The Marlins have not. Vinesh Kanthan, who we brought up earlier, he was instrumental in building a lab for the Rangers before he came over. So that was one project that he alluded to that I don't know how long it will take for that to come together, but that is apparently one of their points of emphasis, setting things up in a way that players can just get better and they have the tools to analyze their performance. Craig mentions the whole concept of having body trackers, the way that people analyze stuff by putting little suction cups on all parts of your body and using that technology to actually track what you're doing and make what you're doing better. In terms of actual player stuff and internally, he just reiterated that just about everybody on this team is available to be traded potentially, with the exceptions of Yuri and Sandy. And that's about it. And with everybody else, they're going to be listening because these are players that they don't have any loyalty to, that Peter Bendix doesn't have. He is willing to look at with a fresh perspective and make those cold decisions if there's one that really works out in his favor. He also suggested that with a high degree of confidence that Avasiel Garcia in his third year with the team is actually going to have a third year with the Marlins. This is somebody that for a lot of last year, early on in 2023, we're talking about as a DFA candidate. And he didn't really do much the rest of that year to kind of change that and show that he's going to be the player they ultimately signed. But that is kind of that's something that I think people have to come to grips with. And that kind of influences what they're going to do this offseason. And we've talked about throughout the course of this offseason some of their targets, potentially, some of the bats they could have gone after, from Mitch Garver to Teoscar Hernandez, the idea of bringing back Jorge Soler. These are guys that would require a decent amount of opportunity at the DH spot. And when you were talking about the idea of pursuing these guys, some of that came with the assumption that Avi is not in the picture, that you make these moves. And I don't think anybody has been or anybody should be expecting anything from Avi, but he's under a guaranteed deal and he's making a big sizable chunk of their payroll And despite all the evidence that they got bamboozled when making that signing a few years ago, yeah, that's something that, as long as he's healthy, and that's a big if. The reason why we haven't seen much of him last year is due to injuries. That if he's healthy, he's going to be a significant part of this at the start of 2024. So overall, it was not a very inspiring space, but he answered a ton of questions about that and past opportunities and trade possibilities out there. And there wasn't really it has been legitimately quiet, is what he reiterated, that there has not been a huge urgency for them to make player personnel moves entering 2024 as they continue to reevaluate what they have before really doing much of anything.
I think the most stressful part becomes
just before we move on, Eli, we're not live on Instagram. Now, Kevin, continue.
Okay. Yeah. What I was going to mention is, the most frustrating part is it's not the fact that they aren't making moves. It's the fact that the only guy they have shown some sort of interest in is Isaiah Kiner-Falefa. It's not, they were in on this guy. They were trying. They legit just haven't gone after any free agents. They're pulling the Miami Heat. They're going to run it back. And that's not, and there's many times it's worked, but there's, with an offense like this one, and again, no offense, they were the worst offense to ever make the playoffs. The worst by far, by whatever it is, they were the worst, and they proved it against Philadelphia. That as fun as this season was, 2023, they were very lucky, and I think this was a fun team to watch. Don't get me wrong. I think they should have been in the playoffs, and they were, and they put up a good fight against Philly for the most part, at least at the start. But let's be honest, you got to add on to this team. I mean, you're going to lose Jorge Soler. You're a home run leader. Who knows how Josh Bell, Jake Berger, and Luis Ariz look. Luis Ariz, you could count on, worst comes to worst, 290. But then think of someone like Jake Berger, who has dealt with injury, hasn't been very consistent until this past year, which Chicago was able to cash out on him for the most, with Jake Eater. You would like to bring in a couple bats, and your minor league system, when it comes to position players, does not look good whatsoever. There's no one I would call up right now from that minor league system, and that says a lot, So it's definitely stressful. You haven't made a single move, and I'm not one to go out here and rant about it, but I think it's time to do it. I mean, you haven't made a move. Your biggest move is bringing in Vidal Brujan, who most likely, no offense, may not even play the whole season with the team if he begins to struggle. And aside from that, Calvin Fauché, I mean, he's probably going to be a AAA depth piece.
Jonathan Davis, Kevin?
What's up?
Jonathan Davis?
Jonathan Davis is your insurance. Jonathan Davis is your Jazz insurance policy.
Yeah, that's really about it. And, I mean, can the team get off to a good start? Maybe. And we'll get into that on the future stream when we're closer and we take a look at how this team looks like in spring training. But, I mean, it is a little stressful to see, with the fan in yourself, that there's nothing happening. You want something to happen. It's definitely tough. And I think we're just going to have to brace for a Tampa Bay Rays-esque situation here where they do close to nothing, and that's it. I mean, that's tough. It really is. But hopefully they get something going. Hopefully they make a trade here or there, and that should be fun by then. If it's Luzardo, if it's Edward, if it's Trevor or Braxton.
With Jonathan Davis, it's not only is it the Jazz insurance policy, but he's also there for just his clubhouse presence. Being around him last season, you just smile around him. So that I'm excited that he's going to be back around, even if it's just a minor league deal with an invite to spring training. We'll get to see him around spring training, and he'll probably find a way to make the team, or he'll probably sit in the minor leagues until someone gets hurt. Hi, Jazz, how are you? And if and when that happens, he'll probably end up playing center field a lot. He played a lot of center field for the Marlins last year before he was injured, and he was great.
I'll give it to Peter Bendix. He's made some pretty good minor league deals.
I have full trust in Jonathan Davis's defense, and he created chaos on offense, which is always fun. So it's good to have him around. And if someone gets hurt, there he is, right there.
Yeah, I mean,
you think with the Marlins, they're maybe waiting for this big money contracts to get off the books, and then we might be able to see them spend multi-year deals, upwards 40, maybe 30, 40, 50 million dollars. Do you guys believe they're just waiting to get the money they currently have off the books to be able to spend that we see other teams do, or do you think this is just the way we're going to see it for the next
If
couple
the
years?
expectation that Avi Garcia is going to play, I think that should tell you enough that they're not going to put any money off the books, nothing like that. I mean, it's. I think Craig said it best. A couple days before the Marlins and pitchers and catchers report, that's when you're going to see a major league signing or two, and they're going to have to squeeze guys off the 40-man too, because that 40-man, it's interesting. But yeah, I mean, you're going to get your Yuli Gurriels or your Jose Iglesias, and that's not what you want, but it's what you're going to get, and they're going to ride out this season. When Sandy comes back 2025, that's what I think they'll try to strike.
Yeah, and that's also when Josh Bell will come off the books. He's going to be, I have to confirm this, I think he will be, if he spends a whole year with the team, will be the highest paid player for a single season that they've ever had on the roster. He's going to make $16.5 million. So he, even though he's actually productive, and by most teams' accounting, he's a decent value at that money, it's uncharted territory for the Marlins. And that combined with some of those other deals, it takes a lot away from them. At the same time, the good players that they do have, some of the other ones, like their salaries are going to continue to rise moving forward. The Sandy deal is significantly backloaded, and his salary goes up a lot in 2025 compared to 2024. I know LMF is in here, and he and others have speculated that Sandy won't throw another pitch for the Marlins because of how high his salary will be in 2025. I don't agree with that, but I see
the question of whether it's him or Sixto pitching. Who pitches first?
I can see the
Sixto.
thought behind that
Sixto.
is for even a great player that is kind of outside the comfort zone historically for not just Bruce Sherman, but all levels, all past Marlins owners as well, to spend quite that much. Yeah, to me, if ultimately you just got to wait to see once the dust settles. This has been a slower than normal moving off season than compared to like past ones, but I touched on it before, at this stage, almost everybody else has done something. And the Marlins really, aside from those moves at the very fringes of the roster, really haven't made any apparent upgrades here. Well, what else was I going to touch on that Mish brought up on these spaces? Yeah.
While you think about that, it does look like they're gearing up to do the exact opposite of spend. And they're going to try and build from bottom up. It looks he's building up his front office of people, player development. He's gonna do what the Rays did and not spend any money. And I guess that's just what we're gonna have to deal with. Don't ever get attached to players.
And to be clear, I mean, I'm not against what they're doing at all to a certain degree. I mean, you're rebuilding this farm system, which they got to do. I mean, as good as the pitching is for the most part, this position player pool that they have in their farm system certainly is a case, and you can't disagree that building up the farm system was what they need to do. Look at how the Rays have done the past 5-6 years. I mean, they rebuild that farm system constantly. They have guys ready to go. They're trying to trade a lot of guys on their current team because they have so many guys in their current farm system, which is one of the best in baseball, that they're trading guys to have those guys come up, and that starts another wave of young players that they have that will have a lot of control, and then they'll have another wave and another one, and that's how it's going to go. But yeah, I mean, this is a transition year, and at this point we're just going to have to just how do I even say it, just accept it, and hope that the system builds up, and it should be fun. This could be one of the better systems in baseball. Peter Bendix has shown that we are out on JD Martinez. No. But I mean, just hope that
to answer your own questions. Does this player cost money? If yes, we're out.
Well, to be fair, they signed Zach Eflin, and they're pretty sure they were on Freddie Freeman not too long ago. So I'll give them that. But they have been trying to, I guess, make that big move, and they did with Eflin, who was pretty good for the Rays. But and then they did the Wander thing, and that hasn't turned out pretty well.
I was talking about the Marlins.
Oh no, but I'm talking about the Rays in terms of them going after.
Eflin is their largest signing ever, in terms of free agent.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the Rays in terms of like the way they develop guys. They develop guys, and then when they know they can trade them for guys in Major League because they know they have other guys coming up. I believe in the deadline they got Aaron Savale. I forgot the first baseman's name they traded to the Guardians.
Manzardo.
Yeah,
But he was a prospect. He was a prospect too.
Yeah,
so.
prospect. They're able to get these MLB guys because they know they have someone else there. The Rays traded Luke Raley. They know they have guys coming in, and they know they can have guys replacing it easily. And I'm guessing that's the way.
And it's also the case where in this case, Luke Raley, that was his first full major league season. He was at peak value. So you're going to trade him now, and you get a pretty good player in return. I think it's Caballero, and you hope that you made the right choice there, because maybe Luke Raley sucks next year and isn't very good and not very productive, or he's really good and you get a good player in Caballero at the end of the day. But they were banking on, let's hope, that we got the peak value out of Raley and we'll ship him out.
Trading Glass now and getting value for him because they knew they weren't going to be able to pay him. It's a lot of things. Hopefully the Marlins can try to emulate in these coming seasons. But we are at the break. We're going to come back. We're going to talk about some trades. Kevin's going to go all in on some international stuff. And then maybe we'll take some fan questions. As always, this is FOF Live presented by Berger and Hicks.
We have been representing people injured as a result of other people's negligence for over 50 years here in South Florida. If you get injured as a result of somebody else's negligence, it can be a car accident, it can be a slip and fall, medical malpractice, negligent security. If somebody else's negligence caused an injury to either you or one of your loved ones, give us a call. Our phone number is on our page, our website is on our page, and our email addresses are on our page. Please give us a call for a free consultation. We'd love to help you. Let Zach and I protect your rights.
Ooh, a cat! Your dad has a catchphrase. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Is that you recording him, Noah?
It's just a matter of time before we're all become reporters in suspenders to match the lawyer in suspenders.
If your dad provides suspenders, I will wear them on stream. I'll wear them to cover a game. If he provides suspenders, I would wear it. I'm making that statement now.
Yeah, just bouncing off what a Marlins fan said. There's a picture of my dad from when he was really young, like 9 or 10 years old. And if you put it next to a picture of me from when I was 9 years old, you can't tell the difference. I'm his clone. So if you want to know what I'm going to look like when I'm, God, how old is he? 50 something. 50 something. He was born in 67.
Well, when he's older. Just say when
I'm that old.
You're
yeah,
older.
That's what I'm going to look like. But yeah, it still is weird seeing my father on the screen. And no, that was not me. That was not me recording. I was not at his office that day.
We're excited though. Should be fun.
Ooh, I froze.
And he's gone. All right.
And he's gone again.
Let's see. So,
come on, Mr. Host.
What do we want to talk about here? We should talk about Jorge Soler, because that was the latest step in that unfortunate saga, is him speaking at one of the practices for this Cuban team in preparing for the Latin American series, Continental series, Intercontinental series. Yeah. The news from
great picture,
him being interviewed in Spanish with Giordano Carmona, and I think Francis Romero was there, essentially saying that he hasn't heard from the Marlins now over 2 months since opting out of his contract. He's been one of the few big name free agents that I think a lot of Marlins fans thought was possible to retain just because of everything that he meant for this team in 2023. But we have Craig himself has suggested that it's almost impossible for him to come back, that he'll get a good 2-year deal from another team. Yeah, Kevin, I think we've seen this coming for a while. This isn't really surprising, but it is at this stage, I think it would be safe to assume that the Marlins fans got to move on and just, appreciate what Soler gave them the last 2 years, especially in 2023. But the reality that he'll be almost certainly wearing a different uniform moving forward.
Yeah, I hope Soler enjoys Fenway Park. But yeah, I mean, I think the moment that Miami didn't offer him the qualifier, I think that was when they kind of told themselves, we're not going to go after this player. We're not going to bring him back. And I would have loved to have him back. I mean, this was one of not only the most clutch players on the Marlins, but one of the most clutch players in baseball this season. So certainly a big loss. You're losing 36 home runs in your lineup. So certainly a huge loss for Miami. He had made a lot of strides in terms of, lower strikeout percentage. He was getting on base a lot more. I mean, he made strides and he played a lot more. He played 136 games this past season. So, big loss for Miami. Hopefully, maybe they make one last hometown discount offer, but very unlikely he's back in the Marlins uniform. I honestly thought he would have been back, given that he's from Miami, that it's easier for him to be home. His offseason home is here. But, yeah, and at the moment, I mean, if you want to watch Jorge Soler, he's going to be in Colombia pretty soon if he's not signed by then. And the team that he signed with gives him permission to play. So, yeah, that's a pretty fun team there. They're doing in Cuba.
Do you guys have I don't want to say preference, but a prediction in terms of where Soler might go to? Do you guys see him in Seattle? Do you guys see him at Fenway?
Boston.
Boston.
I will say, I saw some Red Sox fans. They are going through an interesting offseason as well, where they are being connected with so many big names, and they really have not done a whole lot to improve their team moving forward. So that's the other side of this kind of offseason malaise. The other team, and they're really the only other one. Them and I guess the Mets at the highest level. I
gotta say, I'm impressed with the Cubs. They preached patience from the beginning of the offseason, and it paid off, and they just got Shota Imanaga.
Yeah, so they've finally got something done as well. I will say that I saw some Red Sox fans getting excited in looking at all of Soler's home runs from last year and his long fly balls and all the pull power that he has and getting excited. And I think what they weren't looking at is that the monster itself.
Yeah, those are all doubles.
Quite a few things. So the idea that his home run total, moving to a hitter-friendly park, that he's going to hit even more than 36 home runs, I would pump the brakes on that. I don't think he's necessarily going to build upon the numbers that he had last year moving forward. It's a reason why I was okay with him opting out of his deal, as it is being brought up in the chat that he did opt out of his contract. He did have one more year in place with the Marlins, and he opted out thinking he could get more money. We assume that he will exceed the $13 million that he was guaranteed last year, but still wait and see for absolute confirmation on that. There's risk here. He has a chronic back injury, and he's entering his age 32 season. Those things, although he was durable last year, that's not predictive of what he's going to be moving forward. He's mostly a DH. He doesn't give you a whole lot of flexibility when you put your lineup together. When you put him in the outfield, that doesn't usually turn out all that well. So I understood why, especially with Josh Bell returning for another year, that it wasn't a super clean fit with this Marlins roster. The frustration, as we keep touching on again and again, is that the assumption was they would do something to acquire another position player that more easily fit what they need in the rest of their complementary players, and they still have not done that as well. So it's still a pretty significant void that has not been filled very much. It seems like they're going to fill a lot of that possibly by just having Avi play a lot more than he did this past year, and that's an extremely frustrating proposal to get, considering how much Avi struggled the last couple of years.
You just got to hope Avi
on Soler's home runs specifically. My StatCast expected home runs, which accounts for the wall height and other environmental factors. Of his 36 home runs this season, only 28 would have been a home run in Boston.
Hey, man, that's still pretty good, though.
But that's a huge drop-off from 36 to 28.
Oh, no, of course.
Yeah, the home runs.
The drop-off is huge, but I'm just saying, I mean, 28 home runs out of a guy who, has dealt with injuries and all that.
It's good to see our buddy Alex Carr in the chat joking about the Marlins surplus of second baseman.
Are you willing to offer up Bryson Stott? Is that what I'm hearing? I'll take Bryson Stott.
Oof, I'll take any of those relievers. It's a fun team. They haven't done much either, right? If I recall.
They don't need to.
That's I mean, now once that Shota Imanaga deal goes through, the Marlins will be the only team that has not spent any money on a major league player. So that's not fun, but
It is unusual to have a DH bat ninth, but I remember repeatedly with Lewin Diaz at the end of his
Poor
Marlins tenure
Lewin.
playing first base and batting ninth, which is essentially the same thing. And that
Yep.
that was
And
something.
speaking of Shota Imanaga, that deal just went through.
Did it? No, well.
Yep.
What
4
is it?
years, $53 million.
Well, Marlins could have done that.
That
Under Kim,
was
That's
totally
good money.
doable for the Marlins.
under Kim, they could have done that. But anyways,
You want to talk about the arbitration eligible guys? Now that we're
If
Yeah,
you could
I was
put
going to bring
the-
up trades. We can do that later. Let's bring up some ARB, the 11 names that are arbitration eligible for the Fish. That's a lot of money there.
Yeah,
Roll
over
the
the
tape
next
for that.
over the next 2 days, you're going to see the Marlins attempt to settle on salaries with as many of these guys as possible. It's 11 players. Originally, the list was at 13 entering the offseason, and they non-tendered Hampson. They non-tendered Stallings. They essentially non-tendered Jonathan Davis and then brought him back on a minor league deal. And they traded for Christian Bentoncourt as basically they got him as a salary dump by both the Rays and then the Guardians as well. So he joins the rest of these guys. They're sorted by their service time. And so the guys at the bottom, they're going to be ARB eligible for the first time for Jesus Sanchez. Anthony Bender, a reminder that when guys are on the IL, they're on the major league IL, they still accrue service time. So even though Bender hasn't pitched in a year and a half, he's already in line for a raise. Wow. And the fact that we've reached this point in the offseason, all these players are still on the 40-man roster in the organization. That means the Marlins intend to pay all these guys at this point. If they didn't feel they were worth in the ballpark of these estimates from MLB trade rumors, they would have been cut already, or they would have been traded already. So these guys are going to be around. It's just a matter of negotiating the exact amount. It's been it's a little unclear exactly what is going to change about the way the Marlins negotiate with these guys. But Vinesh Kantan, the director of baseball ops, he did arbitration stuff for the Rangers this past year. And the Rangers have a 25-year streak of not taking anybody to arbitration hearings. They have a 25-year streak of settling with everybody and avoiding the drama that comes with having one of those hearings, which is when you're essentially arguing back and forth about why your money in front of a independent third party. Yeah, so those numbers are and when you add up all these, this is about $36 million of the Marlins payroll in these players. This is 11 guys that almost all of whom you expect to be.
He's asking about the numbers in parentheses, which is their major league service time.
Okay, yeah, that is years and days.
Yeah.
So
I was asking myself the same question too.
All those guys
is that updated?
I manually updated this as well. If you go to the site MLB Trade Rumors, it is not updated at all.
Goes day by day.
Yeah, I created a updated version of that by manipulating that stuff. So those in the parentheses, those are the years and days of service time that all these players have at this point. And Tanner Scott.
Does the 2024 season have to be 366 days of service time?
That's a fair question, but no, that's not how it works. The major league regular season is 183.
Yeah, it's like
180. I believe it's 180.
180. I thought it was 183.
It is in that ballpark. It's 180 something. I know it used to be 186. Maybe they.
So Luzardo is close to getting a year 4 there.
Yeah. So Luzardo, he's in this. He and Braxton Garrett are guys that got. It's not manipulation, but they just got screwed a little bit by these deadlines because once you get to like 170, they count that as a full year. So Luzardo, if he had just a couple more days, then he would be a full year closer to free agency. He's 3 years away. If he just had a few more days, he would already be 2 years away. And Braxton Garrett is the same way. Braxton Garrett's been around a while. He's been pitching in the majors since 2020, and he's still not even eligible for the first time. He still is 5 years away from free agency. Also because he is just a few days short of having an additional year in there with him.
And this is days on the active roster or 40-man roster.
Just days, yeah, either the active or injured list. Actually, injured lists also count. But yeah, when you're sent to the minors, that doesn't count. When you're suspended for something, that doesn't count. To bring up here, just a reminder that of these guys, Luzardo and Arise both went to hearings last year with the Marlins, and they both beat the Marlins in those hearings where they couldn't bridge their dispute. And what was awkward about Arise is that the Marlins traded for him after the
deadline, right?
Yeah, they traded for him where he couldn't come to terms with the Twins. Then he got traded, and I thought, hey, if you trade for him and you like him a lot, maybe you settle with him to get your relationship off on a good foot. And they couldn't do that, so they went to a hearing that before he even played and suited up for the Marlins, and he won a little extra money out of that. And Luzardo did the same thing last year. But with so many players, it's hard to imagine them settling with all of them, and given just all these separate negotiations that go on. But yeah, we will find out by mid-afternoon Friday. We'll have a pretty complete accounting for the dollars and cents. If not the dollars, then at least know who they settled with and who they are taken to arbitration with. And usually shortly after the deadline, you should see some spike in trade activity because there are hundreds of players across baseball that are arbitration eligible, and most of them are going to settle on salaries before by that point. So you're going to have a clearer idea. It's easier to consummate trades if you know exactly how much money you're trading for with these players.
Yeah, I would think
no.
they're gonna. Do we have any inkling of it yet? No, I don't know. No, we love you, Alex Carr, but I would think they're gonna settle with almost. I would say most of these guys, at least Sanchez, Bender, Jazz, Trevor, Okert, Puck. I don't know about Bethencourt. He just got here, so maybe they go to hearing. I hope you would assume they settle after his struggles, and probably Chagua. I'm interested to see how they handle Scott, because this is his first big time season, but this season for him was one of the best reliever seasons in the history of this franchise. So he certainly has a case there, and he went up against the meat of the order, as Skip says, and he proved himself. And Arise was the batting champ, so those guys definitely have their worth, and they should, hopefully they get what they get. And but I would think most of these guys are going to get settled. I'm interested mainly in Scott, Arise, and Luzardo, especially Luzardo pitching a career high. I believe I'm amounting over 200 strikeouts. I mean, couldn't have been a better season for someone like Luzardo.
I am most interested in Jazz and the way that goes, because a very big factor in the ARB process is your availability and your volume that you play. And that is what's holding him back. That's why he's still a relatively cheap player, despite being, by most people's accounting, one of the most talented players on the team. And that on a per game basis, being a very good player, somebody that was an all-star in 2022, those accolades can be used in these negotiations, and they do generally help you if it comes to a hearing when you talk about some of your accomplishments and awards that you've won. And so he is somebody that, at least as best as we know Jazz, he thinks very highly of himself and what he can do, what he's capable of. So this is probably, it might be a sobering negotiation for the Marlins to say that you're only worth a couple $1 million this year, despite all that you've shown when you've been on the field. I'll be curious to see how that goes, and whether that goes to a hearing one way or another. That's one I had circled. Other than that, yeah, we'll find out with these guys. But it's a lot of players, and they've, as we touched on, they've already done some trimming from where this group was entering the offseason.
And that's why, I mean, the Jazz one is interesting as well, and that's why I do think they'll settle. I mean, he has to understand he only played, a couple more games than he did last season. I don't think he even got to 100 games. So you have to tell yourself, yeah, I've been good when I'm on the field, and I was an all-star as a second baseman, but I haven't been on the field that much. I mean, I don't think he's played 100 games in his career yet with the Marlins. Maybe his first year in 2021, but aside from that, 60 games in 22, and I believe 90-something in 23. I mean, yeah, you're getting an increase there, but still, I mean, you're putting yourself in a situation where you're not playing much and you don't have much to prove for. And I know he's been good, and he's been really good when he's been on the field. He's had his moments. He shows the power. He's shown that he could adjust the center field very well. And aside from that, I mean, it's more availability than anything. And now that you bring it up, maybe they don't settle with Jazz. When is DLC? I don't know. I think next year.
Yeah, I think an additional year away for DLC. Along with a bunch of
Noah's going to be the
improvement. Yeah, he has a good case. DLC does have a good case if he has another improving year. I mean, he was pretty good last year. So
Yeah. Let's go ahead and talk some little trades. Obviously, the two biggest names for the Marlins that look like, I don't want to say that are rumored, right? They're in the rumor mill are Edward Cabrera and Jesus Luzardo, but it looks like more so now Eddie than Jesus Luzardo. But again, with Luzardo, it looks like
no. Luzardo definitely already. Luzardo 100%
I haven't heard
already.
anything
More?
Edward related.
Edward
I haven't
really?
seen Ed. I haven't seen
More
much
inclined to
Edward.
trade Eddie
There
than
was-
Luzardo.
I saw something secondhand about I'll have to double check who it was that brought it up today about Cabrera being more likely to be traded with than Luzardo, which is something that I think most people would agree with. That even though
Yeah,
Luzardo has been
that
the
is
one that's talked about, Cabrera is the one that's more easily movable because
Yeah.
the way that the Marlins internally don't value him the same way that with other organizations they still are really tantalized by his talents, and that'd be a smaller type of trade, but that is one that is seemed a lot more realistic the entire way around. With Eddie, and that came up on the Spaces briefly last night too. That he's just a really difficult player to value because the production was so shaky last year. It was better the year before. His stuff is really nasty, but it translates
Can't throw
to
strikes.
yeah, it's the performance has been really uneven. He's still young. He's still really cheap. He's not even arbitration eligible yet. He's also out of minor league options. So if he struggles really badly at the start of next year, then you can't send him down. You have to live with it and figure out what to do with him and whether he's actually a starter or reliever. Yeah, he's a complicated guy, and I think he is the one that is. Once the dust settles on this offseason, I think he's far more likely to find a new home than Luzardo will.
I think when it comes to buzz, Luzardo's name is out there, but more likely you have to go with Edward. I mean, this is a guy who's been in there for a very long time. And I did forget to mention this on the Spaces, but teams, and I know we're talking about major league trades, and we look back at the Rockies and that situation with Edward. They were going to trade a major league player, and I know it's Brendan Rodgers. He's like trading Luzardo. Yeah, 100%. Yeah. I hope, Peter, if you're watching, just read
Took
that.
the words out of my mouth.
Yeah, but I mean, I guess I would ask Eli, do you think there are other teams aside from the Rockies that value Edward Cabrera to give up a major league piece?
Yeah. I think a lot of the thing is his value is definitely lower than it was last year, right?
Yeah.
There was that rumor last year of him for Brendan Rodgers. And I think both of those guys, their value is down a lot. So maybe that deal is on the table again, just because Eddie's coming off the weird season he had, and Brendan Rodgers lost most of his season to a shoulder injury. When he came back, he was not very good at all. So maybe that's a deal that might actually be on the table again, because both of those players are a year further away from being really hyped prospects and potential stars in that regard. Yeah, I think it's still possible to get something interesting for him. It's just that the big concerns hovering over this Marlins team are their long-term shortstop situation, their long-term catcher situation, and even just beyond that, more young, controllable bats at any position. It'll be hard to get one of those guys for Eddie if they're already established. Those are the type of guys where, yeah, you would have to swing and take your chance on a really highly regarded prospect. Another thing that came up from Mish's perspective is his feeling that if they swing one of these deals for one of their starting pitchers, they'll look for guys that are likely in the upper minors, ones that have barely any big league experience or none whatsoever, but are kind of on the cusp. That intuitively makes a lot of sense because it would take both teams are absorbing some risk in that regard. Marlins bring in one of those guys, even if they haven't proven themselves at all, but at the same time, if they pan out, you have all these years of cheap club control over them.
Yeah.
I think of all the guys that are being talked about, there's one guy that hasn't been talked about, most because he wasn't really seen in the second half of the season. What would Trevor Rogers bring back? Problem is he got hurt
because he was hurt. Yeah,
he's worth something.
Yeah, something, but I don't think you have to rebuild your value back in this market. And I would say, I mean, I personally think pitchers are going for a lot more than what they should this year. And look at Sean Manaea, what he got, and Frankie Montas, for example. But I mean, think about it. Trevor Rogers is coming off a bad 2022, I want to say, and he is in his 2023. He barely pitched, and I will give it. He was turning the corner right before, but you got to rebuild your value. I mean, if he shows that he can do it in spring training and he gets off to a good start during the season, and Miami is not playing well, that's when you consider it. Not right now. I mean, right now you would be selling him extremely low, in my opinion, and that goes to other guys who are coming off of injuries.
Yeah, that is true. That's the difference between him and somebody like Eddie, is he still has those options remaining. They really bent over backwards in 2022 to not demote him and send him to the minors when he had that ERA at 5.5, and clearly it was out of sync. They put him on the Phantom IL during the middle of that season to get him right. So they preserved all of his options for something like this. But I'm still relatively high on Trevor because I just remember so vividly what he looked like during that rookie year. And checking so many of the boxes.
I'm high on him because of how he looked right before he got hurt. He had that confidence back. He had that swagger back. He looked good out there on the mound, and then he went down with the injury that just couldn't come back from.
Right. Yeah, I'm still considering that the bigger injury he had last year. He had 2 injuries. First was to his biceps on his pitching arm, but then when he was rehabbing, it was on his non-throwing lat on his upper back that cost him the rest of the year, his non-throwing arm. And that's something that I think you could feel relatively confident is going to be in the rearview mirror moving forward with him. So yeah, I would hold tight on him. But Edward, if you get good value at this stage for Edward, then that's the pretty obvious guy to move.
There's also the injury issue with Edward because I lost count of how many starts he left last season because he had a blister. He's got to figure that out.
Yeah, that's true. Mm-hmm. Some more questions. Jonathan India, who has been a trade candidate for like 2 years now and still has not been moved.
Yeah, that's interesting.
I think I saw something where with India, someone suggested India for Rogers straight up as a 1-for-1.
That would be funny. I will give him that.
I don't think the Cardinals would do. Sorry, the Reds would do that.
I don't think the Marlins.
I don't even think he's a good defensive shortstop. I have to look back, but
he's not a shortstop.
Yeah, there you go. So I don't see him as a fit.
Hey, what's another second baseman? You put him anywhere.
I would like Royce.
Yeah, that is. Peter Pratt brought that up as a Luzardo blockbuster return. Royce Lewis for Luzardo.
Yeah. Let's see.
Or you could bring Pablo back.
The Yankees. I'm looking at our trades MLB. That's where we're at on the point of the show. Geez. Looking at Instagram. What do you guys think?
I think that's our cue to cut it here.
Yeah, I see Oswald Peraza, and I already have flashbacks of Pablo.
Yeah, Lord. I mean, only other event coming up is international signing day on Monday. The Marlins, I believe, already have a deal in place with a player. I'm blanking out on a name. I will probably say
Luis Cova.
Luis Cova, yeah, Venezuelan outfielder, specifically center field. Mm-hmm. Expectation is it will go after catchers and outfielders. So I expect a couple catchers out there and, addressing an organizational need very early on and having those guys develop from the start. And something that Bendix, I know, touched on a lot throughout, his press conferences is the international market and making sure that they could hit on those guys. And we'll see what they do. Maybe it's quantity over quality. I am interested to see what course of action they'll take in this case. I don't know how involved Peter Bendix will be in this process. Probably none or very little. But Ocampo, he's hit on a lot of guys before. Look at the Astros rotation. Almost all of those guys he got in the international market. So should be interesting to see what someone like Oz could do. And I mentioned him because Craig mentioned that Oz is kind of the one leading the way with this process of international market. And that's Ocampo's forte, I guess you could say. So should be interesting to see who else they get on top of him.
Sorry.
We're gonna have your dad. We're gonna have your dad on the show.
It's already happening. Like it's coming faster than you think.
He's gonna take over. It's gonna be
Luzardo will not be a New York Met.
Yeah, in my opinion, ultimately my opinion doesn't matter much at all on this, but I just don't see any more of the new scheduling format why there's any anxiety about trading within your division, because you play those teams head to head less than you used to. In those teams, especially in the Marlins case, winning your division is not really as
meaningless
important as it used to be, not even close to it, where all the teams in your league can get in the way if you make it to the postseason, not especially, but the ones in your division, there's less difference than ever between them and the ones in the other National League divisions
Unless
right
you're in
now.
the AL East, it doesn't really matter. The
Right.
AL East is just it's always a dogfight for the top
Yeah.
spots.
Yeah. So I don't know how Bendix feels about it, or what sort of emphasis he'd put on that. Which trade partners? I think you just deal with whatever front offices you feel you can have a good working relationship with. It does vary by team to team, that just the way that you communicate with each other and being able to have reasonable exchange of ideas. So I think that is more important than the geography of the potential trade partners.
And with that, one last thing before we go, a quick Johnny Cueto update.
Oh God.
Well, his debut in the Dominican League, first time since 2009.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. He's with
Two and
Vidal
two-thirds.
Brujan.
2 2/3 innings, 3 hits, 3 earned runs, 4 walks, 0 strikeouts.
I wish
Yeah,
him the best. He's a
He's
He's
good
got
guy,
a 10-13 ERA already. He and a balk. He balked.
He is on Vidal Brujan's team. They've been the best team in the Dominican postseason, and he made his debut in the middle of the playoffs. And the game's not over yet. It's only entering the 5th inning, but they're down by a few runs now because they're using
the
him
best
right
team.
there. It's not the time to be digging up like legends of the past and giving him a
You want to know who he
retirement
gave up
tour.
the home run to?
Did he? I don't think so.
Pedro Severino.
You're
No.
lying. No, that can't be.
Catcher Pedro Severino.
There we go. Yeah. I was like, oh, whoa.
Yeah, so that's unfortunate if they lose this game and that comes back to hurt them in their effort to win their.
They're in the best position though, right?
Yeah, but every game is important. So we will see.
I mean, hey, if they fall out and that means that
Just roll out
Gigantes
tickets.
make it in, I'll be happy because then I get to see Wellington Cepeda.
We get to see
Caribbean
Vidal
Series.
Brujan for the first time in Lone Depot.
Right. And with that, this is FOF Live presented by Burger and Hicks. For myself, Daniel, Kevin, Noah Burger, and Eli, this is FOF. As always, go fish.